Hello, marketers. This is the Funnel Lab. Welcome to Funnel Lab Fridays. I'm your co-host, Doug Bell, CMO of CaliberMind. Angela Hill, I can't talk this morning, Angela. Angela Hill, Chief Outsider CMO and Partners, joining me today. And today, Angela, you're going to be talking about the smart funnel. We're talking about AI SaaS applications reshaping the B2B buyer experience. Welcome, Angela.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
So glad to be here. You and I are sort of our organization's tool heads. I don't know if that's a new term. I don't know if that's offensive in any way to you. I apologize to your family if it is. But you and I are really into applications that we think are making a big difference. I will mention that along with being CMO here at CaliberMind, also a fractional CMO. I have other clients just like Angela. So Angela, talk to me about yourself and Chief Outsiders and why you don't mind being called a toolhead.
I've been in branding and marketing for 30 years. I started off with big brands, big agencies. Then I had my own agency for 20 years. I sold it last year. I've been doing branding and marketing strategy for 20 years, and I ran a team. And then I've been working as a fractional CMO off and on for about 6 or 7 years. So I joined Chief Outsiders last year because of all of the work that I do. Strategy is my favorite. And so I really like being able to go into different organizations and help them realize their marketing, sales, and business objectives. And you and I, what we have in common is we really love to geek out about the coolest tools and what's working and what's changing, because I feel like, especially with marketing tools and with AI, it's an ever moving target that is almost impossible to hit and it's impossible to catch. So I rely on other people like you, Doug, to say, okay, here's what I figured out. What have you figured out? What did you try? How did that work for you? So I'm excited to be here. Thank you.
98% of what she just said is true. The 2% about me knowing about applications more than Angela, you're going to find out pretty quickly, folks, is untrue. And that's a great setup because Angela, ultimately, we really have to make improvements for our clients, and quite often that comes down to software, right? So the
Yep.
strategy and the execution, the design, all that stuff is really important, but quite often we're finding shortcuts with software, which is why we are toolhead. So here's what we're going to do today. What we're going to do is we're going to talk about 8 applications we're using, considering, or monitoring. So there's some cases that I'm going to talk to you about applications that I haven't quite used yet, but I'm watching sort of its impact across the funnels I help. Angela, we're going to start with you. Format is simple. Tell us what your application does, why you love it, and how we think it will improve the buying experience. Hyros, go.
Okay. That's, I'm not going to share my screen just yet because Hyros is my last piece of software, or the first one I'm talking about is Hyros. And then that was a sneak peek into HubSpot Breeze, which will be the last piece of software that I talk about. But what I like about Hyros is it's a really cool piece of code you plug into your website, and you use AI to improve your return on ad spend. And what makes it really great is that it's going to bring in all of your client data. It's going to bring in all of your ad spend from Google Ads and Meta and Bing and wherever else you're spending money. And then it gives me the ability to get granular on the level of detail. So for example, let's say I'm in Google AdWords and I'm running some campaigns and they're specific for a product or service that my client is selling. I can dig on a campaign performance. I can dig in on city and state. But if I want to dig in by city, by service, and tie that into a physical location, I can see how my advertising is performing for a physical location of my client. I can get that level of granular detail to say, well, in Chicago, Illinois, this type of messaging is resonating, but in St. Louis, Missouri, this type of image is performing better. But in Kansas City, Kansas, this combination of this headline with this call to action is performing better. And therefore, I can really dial in how my ads are performing so that I get better conversions, because I don't care as much about how many people saw my ad or the click-throughs, how many clicked on it. I care about the conversions. Did someone call me? Did someone fill out a form? Did someone book an appointment? Did it turn into revenue? And so that really helps me as a CMO support sales for my clients. And what I have seen is an average of improvement to ads of about 15 to 30%.
Wow. So, uh, so we're also talking about is organizations that have geofencing, geographic sophistication in many ways. You're not able to operate from Google's freeware to be able to really manage that well. And the way that this improves that buyer's journey is that you're getting presented ads that are useful to you as the buyer, and ads that are actually going to help you. If you sort of think about the most virtuous role for marketing and marketing organizations, it's to help people, right, ultimately find the applications they need, because guess what? They have a problem they're looking to solve. So Hyros is really interesting, and I have to say, I'm gonna go to another application here, Angela, that feels a little tangential to the buyer's journey, but in many ways similar to Hyros. It really makes sure that organizations are, in this case, Hyros is about the right ad. I'm going to talk to you about the right prospect. So there's a application that is disrupting the Zoom infos of the world, and it is called Clay.com. If you haven't heard of Clay, Clay effectively is a giant API collector in spreadsheet form with embedded AI. I know that sounds like a lot, but really what that means is that it can scrape first-party data. So let's say you have a subscription to Zoom Info, but guess what? You don't need that. You can get third-party data. So it will go out using what are called Clayagents and scrape information for you, right? So think about being able to work in a spreadsheet with AI to go iterate on data. And so how this is being used, and the reason I love it is that it really goes across sort of the marketing cycle from strategy all the way to execution, and that you can use a tool like this to test things like your ICP and segmentation. And the way you can do that is you can actually generate email test campaigns with, say, certain messaging, or to test boundaries. I love that type of thing. But if you take it all the way to the point where you've got, let's say, an AE, and this is a common use case, a seller, in other words, they can actually organize and execute campaigns. And again, especially if they're hooked into something like HubSpot, and Clay integrates with just about everything, they can actually move from concept to campaign in a matter of an hour or so and have much better targeting as a result of Clay's AI capabilities. So, Angela, you were going to talk about lead forensics, but is Clay something you're seeing out there with clients these days, or has it not quite made its your way yet?
So I didn't hear about Clay until you told me about it, which is pretty cool because to show me something I haven't seen before, I always get excited about that because I try and be on top of everything, but that's not possible. And I love this concept of being able to scrape first party data and get third party data using these Clayagents. I have looked at a bunch of other tools because whenever you're using something like Zoom Info or Apollo or Rocket Reach or one of those types of companies, there's always challenges in how accurate is the data, or like even if you buy a list, how accurate is the data? Do I have all the data? Is the phone number that I was given a mobile phone or is it a cell phone? Is the email address up to date? Am I going to get a hard bounce or soft bounce? So there's all the stuff that I do on my side to make sure the data is accurate. But I love this concept of being able to plug into this giant API collector to then go and grab and augment and append all of this other data so that I have the most quality information to start from before I start putting stuff into a system to send out messaging. So that sounds pretty cool to me.
Yeah, it's. I have to say the you're mentioning data quality, and I will tell you, full respect to Zoom Info, I think that's something they figured out and conquered. But still, at the same time, you're looking at maybe a 60-70% accuracy rate. The thing that Clay does is that actually you can go and create Clayagents that, in parallel with the data scrape, go validate the data. So yes, you're getting to cleaner data faster. Here's the scary part: it's $99 a month, right? So this is, I think the Zoom Info platform is going to run you 70. So lead forensics. This
That's
is
amazing.
really, really interesting because again, we're in data land, completely appropriate given that we're talking with the CaliberMind CMO here. But tell me about lead forensics a bit more.
Okay, so lead forensics is what I call an IP address sniffer. That's not an industry term, that's an Angela term. I make up a lot of my own metaphors and analogies to explain stuff to clients. And when I say it's an IP address sniffer, what that means is if I plug the code for lead forensics into my client site, it tells me what company came to the site. And this is really valuable in a B2B environment or, you know, are your existing customers coming? Are your target customers coming? If you want to sell deeper into an organization and do account-based marketing, that level of intent or intelligence data is so valuable. So what Lead Forensics does is it tells you which company came to the site and what pages they looked at. What I do is then I connect it via workflow and I push the company details and the page visits into HubSpot. If the company already exists in HubSpot, it appends that contact company information in terms of the activity details. And if it doesn't, then it creates the company as a record and then it puts the details in. And then, speaking of Zoom Info, I like to add on to that, connect that information to Zoom Info. I run a query for 3 to 5 ideal job titles that I want from my ideal target company. I push those contacts into a sales CRM like HubSpot, and then I run a sales sequence to start nurturing them. And then that's how marketing is able to provide some warmed up targets for business development that we wouldn't have normally gotten because these people are not picking up the phone and they're not filling out a form, but they are doing their due diligence before they call you.
What I love about this, Angela, is this is enabling a motion that could not have existed with something like Marketo. And that's no slam on Marketo. It's just simply, we are moving so much faster than the days of, gee, I have this list that looks interesting. I should build a sequence in Marketo, and that will take me 4 hours to actually get it out there and test it and execute it.
Right.
Again, it's when Marketo came out, it was just like, and now here we are with lead forensics. So, okay, great. We've really been on this data theme, which I like. But what I want to do is actually talk a bit about how AI is showing up in the buyer's journey in a very practical way. And I wrote an article about this. Oh gosh, it's almost 2 years ago now, Angela, as I realize. But I wrote an article effectively saying that I thought that chatbots would eat B2B websites.
Mm.
And my rationale here is that all of the B2B websites that you encounter are generally brochures with content hubs in their middle. Here's everything that's
Right.
wonderful about me, and I'm going to hook you with really good content that you can't find elsewhere so I can engage with you. And that's how you interact with the brand. Well, we're sort of all used to that experience. But guess what? It is a pain to go and figure something out like, do I want to work with this applicant or this vendor? Qualified is sort of understood and recognizes that vision. So this is chat software. This is pre-AI chat software, but they were the first to really embrace this idea of agents being independent and those agents effectively doing their best to improve the buyer journey so that you don't have to interact with a human, which is the promise of chatbots before AI, but also that it's mining your CMS, it's mining the website. And to the degree you want it to, it can also mine other resources. Let's say another website that's going to help this prospect have a better experience. So that's why I love Qualified. I'm not saying Qualified is going to win the AI chat software. I'm just saying I'm seeing them way ahead of most folks.
So I
Okay,
love
so
this concept of chat software, but for me, I kind of get stuck when I'm first setting it up because I second guess how much stuff I have to put in my knowledge base and how many FAQs I have to build out. So, do you have best practices, recommendations for what's a minimum viable for a chatbot like that?
yeah, so I would just say that we're talking about ultimately how much metadata do I have, and then how do I factor that metadata in such a way that something like a chatbot could work. What I've seen from, and again, I've used Qualified before. I have not implemented their AI version. We recently went through a buying cycle to look at
Mm,
applications like Qualified. And to answer your question, Angela, what I really loved about it was it effectively mined your CMS, right? And so if
cool.
you have, and what it also does, it says, this feels like a logical pathway for a conversation with a buyer, and then it learns from it, right? So that problem that you've had before with indexing content,
Hmm.
it doesn't happen with an AI backed model, which is really, in my estimate, the beauty. But I want to talk about PathMonk next. This is your application, Angela. And man, I have to tell you, I just saw this last week, and I think we both enjoy surprising each other with applications. And you and I was talking about, like, Chigali, I have a client, and I'm worried I have a conversion problem, and you popped up and showed me PathMonk. So talk to me about PathMonk. We're getting into operating layers here with Qualified and PathMonk, and I think people are really going to love this concept.
Yeah, so PathMonk is basically the way I explain it, it's an overlay that provides micro experiences via AI and an AI avatar that's going to guide your website visitors through the buyer's journey. So it's serving them different content in terms of awareness, consideration, and decision to increase conversions. So for one of my clients, the goal is form submissions, while I have another client where their goal is booked appointments. Um, what I am seeing right now is about, for one client, I have a 50% improvement because I'm running an A/B test with and without PathMonk. And then for my other client, I'm seeing a 70% improvement in conversions. So
Wow.
I'm kind of geeking out and loving PathMonk right now because I'm all about the conversions. Like I don't care if a million people came to my website. I care how many people filled out a form and submitted it. And then once I have those conversions, I can say, well, were they good conversions or bad conversions? But what PathMonk does is it gives website visitors a different way of navigating the site and finding the content that they're looking for rather than forcing them in terms of the user experience to go through the primary and secondary navigation, which is my best guess. And so the AI watches the behavior as people are clicking on the website and says, oh, I think you're at this point in the buyer's journey. I think you're looking for this type of information. Let me show you this piece of the overlay and help you get to where you want to go faster.
And I love the pairing here with PathMonk and Qualified because in many ways I see AI chatbots and AI backed content presentation layers that learn, and that's really what we're talking about with PathMonk. I see those two things collectively eating your B2B website. So sort of the
Yep.
2 year ago vision was the whole website would go away. I do think those websites are going to get more and more reduced down, and I think it's going to be because of applications like PathMonk.
Yeah,
Uh,
I
Folks,
agree.
I've seen this. It is so cool. I have not applied it in a client yet. It's coming soon, though. I have to tell you, it's cheap, and not to be the value, but the costs are low relative to what you would pay for sort of hunt and peck optimization that you normally would see. So I'm going to mention an application that I'm a huge fan of. I've yet to be able to apply it yet. It's called Tofu HQ. If you want to find Tofu HQ, it's tofuhq.com. The thing there's a couple big use cases for tofu, but in light of our conversation today, for really optimizing and making the B2B buyer's journey a better experience, that's where Tofu HQ shines. So a little bit of an overlap here too, I think, with Angela with PathMonk, um, in that what I like so much about Tofu is that it personalizes content and it does it with large language models and presents it instantly. And so we've all had this ABM moment where we decided that we wanted custom landing pages, right? And so pre sort of tofu, you would create all of these pages. Remember doing this, Angela? You had
Oh, yeah.
some poor kid with a WordPress template. Like, what if Bob Smith clicks on this? Well, we can't make one for Bob. We'll make one for Bob's company, right?
Hmm.
And so what tofu does is it really cuts that out. So it's presenting like, hey, if it's Bob Smith from so and so company from Geofence, Nebraska, blah blah blah, it's going to present a scary amount of detail, and the customers customized within the context of content you already have on your website. So I love this concept. I love this tool. Go check it out, tofuhq.com. Okay,
And
Angela.
before we move on, Doug, do you want to
Yes.
explain to people who don't know what tofu means?
So I had a CEO, former pro basketball player from Germany, who hated tofu. and would actually gag with the mention of tofu. I have to tell you, tofu HQ. I don't know what it stands for. I have a feeling it stands
What?
for top of funnel, maybe.
Yes, it's tofu, mofu, bofu.
All
Top
right,
of funnel,
fantastic.
middle of funnel, bottom of funnel.
Or actually, what we named our children. I have three kids, and those are their names. Tofu is just a total horrible child. No, but so yeah, top of funnel. It is code in the marketing world for so tofu is code for top of funnel. All right, so thank you, Angela, for quizzing me on my Friday morning logic here. Okay, you are a huge. So if there is such thing as a ninja for an application, you guys remember when Mark Heddo spit out all these amazing experts? Well, it is Angela. She is a HubSpot ninja, and I'm always sort of shocked the things that she has gotten it to do. You're going to talk to me about HubSpot Breeze, and I think, are we going to see HubSpot Breeze as well?
Yes.
Okay.
So I have my screen somewhere ready to share. Here we go. So before I type in my thing, I just want to tell you HubSpot had their big conference, which was inbound a couple weeks ago, and they announced more AI improvements. They have Copilot, which is a helpful chatbot, and Breeze, which is an agent. And the agent you can use to run workflows and reports. What I like about it is you don't have to know the specific special terminology that HubSpot uses in order to get what you want out of it. You can just type in a basic prompt. So I'm going to do it in real time. Hopefully it works for me. So I'm typing in what is my close loss versus won ratio for this year. I generate report, boop, 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 beep, boop. And then here we go. It gives me my close won versus loss ratio. Before, I would have had to go in and map all my data saying, oh, my data source is deals, and my measure is counted deals, and my dimension is the deal stage, and my date range is year to date. And then I'd have to specify like what kind of chart I want. What I love about Breeze is that now I can create a report, and it also works for automations and workflows. I type in with simple language what I want, and then it generates the thing that I'm looking for. You can stop sharing now.
So HubSpot Breeze. I think you mentioned this is beta at this point, Angela.
Yeah, it's still in beta. They have released it to everyone that's on HubSpot, but they also have the qualifier of beta because they have so many little pieces of this AI that they have interjected into different sections of the software. So it's kind of like a pleasant surprise when you go somewhere like, I'm going to make a report. And it's like, oh, would you like to use the AI generator? Yes, please. I would like to use that, but it's not like fully baked in just yet. So it doesn't work perfectly. But what I found is one of the hardest things I run into is when I'm creating a workflow and I know what I'm trying to get out of it, but I don't know how to find within my bazillion menus to select how to get what I want. Now I just use, okay, I want to do a workflow that, pulls from this list and it sets someone as a marketing qualified lead. And then because it's a form submission, it designates them as a marketing contact and it subscribes them to this email newsletter. And then I want to send a notification because I got a form submission to the contact owner, but I also need someone on the BD team to get notified. I can type all that up, and instead of having to manual build it, it goes boop, boop, beep, beep, boop, and then poof. It's not perfect, but it gives me enough of a starting point that I dial it in because it's 90% there. So I'm a big fan of Breeze right now.
Okay. And I especially am a big fan of the fact that you have to say "beep boop" every time that you talk about a cloud server
That's a
firing in the
technical term,
background.
by the way.
That is what happens actually. All of the code that's out there is just beep booping along. So I'm going to keep us. I'm going to keep us rolling. I'm becoming a bigger and bigger HubSpot fan, and there was a time when I thought HubSpot was absolutely only for SMBs, but it is getting more and more powerful. I see it. I see it putting some siege on the Salesforce tower over here in San Francisco. Okay, so our theme today has been how do we improve the buyer experience, and what are the applications shaping that journey? It's been about AI. The question I have for everybody is, what do you do with all that data, right? So there was a point, and this may have changed a slight bit, especially with sort of the SaaS recession we've been going through for a couple of years, but there was a point where the average organization had 64 applications in their
Oh
MarTech
my
stack,
gosh.
64, right? And so we've seen this period of shedding of applications, and now what's happening, right? The Path Monks, right? The Tofu HQs, like they're all starting to bolt on again. And in many ways they're displacing sort of some of the traditional SaaS motions we talked about before. Marketo is a good example. So the question is, what do you do with all that data, and how do you analyze it, right? They're creating little walled gardens of siloed data. So let's pop open CaliberMind. Folks, yes, I know this is a show sponsored by CaliberMind. I know it's awfully convenient I'm talking about CaliberMind's role in this context, but I have to tell you, one of the things that I think is most important for us as modern marketers is to be able to keep up with the pace of change with all of these applications getting bolted on. Where are you going to source that data and rationalize it? And so what you're looking at here is the piece of CaliberMind that I think 98% of marketers are missing, which is the ability to understand your investment's real-time return on investment. And so the view you're seeing here is showing different platforms. In this case, what we're talking about here are, say, how are we doing with Google Ads versus Salesforce versus LinkedIn versus G2. And I'm not going to do a demo today, but this is a great example of how when you capture all of your great first and third party data, you organize it on a timeline and you score that. By the way, I just told you how to do attribution. Good luck with the beep boops. It's hard, right? But once you have that framework in place and you've got real-time spend data coming through, you can make real-time decisions. So we've all been there, Angela. Well, our CPC is this, or our CPA is
Hmm.
that, but we don't understand what the lifetime value is of the client. In other words, are we returning bookings? Do we
It's
have a
huge.
clear ROAS picture? So this is where I'm going to say our last application is. But Angela, you and I. So thanks for sharing that screen. Let's see our smiling faces. So Angela, you and I passed over some really interesting applications because we didn't have a ton of time. Is there something that you sort of wish I hadn't taken off your list that you wanted to talk about today? Because I'm very happy to give you the final toolhead word.
Okay, so there's just one more. I I personally haven't used it, but I have a client that I'm working with that uses it currently. And what it is it's called customers.ai. It is basically like lead forensics. It's an IP address sniffer, but whereas lead forensics is for B2B, customers.ai is for B2C. And it I don't know all the details, but it is compliant. It is because of how it's collecting the information. I think it's another IP address sniffer. And what it does is it tells you if you're in a B2C environment, who are the people that are coming to your website. Now, why do I care about that? One, I can feed that data back to my Google AdWords and back to my Meta ads to tell them how it's performing and dial in the demographics of the person I'm targeting. Two, I can grab that information and I can plug it into some kind of marketing automation system. In this case, my client is using Keep, KEAP, and then we can put them into a really sophisticated email drip campaign with different branches for if then scenarios to nurture those people because they've come to the website, they've indicated interest. Now we want to get them to the point where they're booking an appointment or they're filling out a form. So that's one I didn't have on the list, but I think is also pretty cool because not everyone is B2B and not everyone is B2C, and different tools work for different scenarios.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I said I would give you the final word. I promise I am, Angela, but I'm gonna throw one other concept at you today, and really that is this idea of what the future state's gonna be. So what do you think is gonna come out of the woodwork here from an AI standpoint? Is there anything that you're sort of like, I expected the AI chatbots to take over the world. I was a little premature on that, to be sure, but are there other things that we should be looking out for in the coming months that you expect to pop out?
So it's kind of a love hate relationship. I love the idea that AI can generate a lot of content at scale based on what you feed it. I also hate that because I don't want to put creative people out of work. I think there's a lot of value to creativity. So I think it's important to think about AI kind of like the way we think about Google. It's It's a piece of technology where we put in a request and we get something back. But then the quality of what we put into the request determines the quality of what we get back. And the final output isn't the final output. It's just a starting point to then do additional work to get to a quality final output.
Great advice. Great parting advice. Thank you, fellow Toolhead, for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
All right. We hope to do it again. Join us next week. We're going to be joined by Tish Millsap. She's a marketing attribution expert, and I mean ninja level. And she's going to talk about how to make the transition from DIY to attribution software. So many large organizations build up there on their own. Guess what? That's brittle. Those things fall apart. Tish is going to give us a roadmap to breaking out of that. Thanks for joining us today, everybody.